I thought I knew my boundaries, until my husband's cousin sat beside me, and suddenly, the room felt way too small. I never planned on spending that evening alone with her. It was supposed to be quick, 5 minutes at most. My husband had asked me to stop by his cousin's house to fix her Wi-Fi, since she'd been having trouble with the router all week. "She'll appreciate it," he'd said casually. I didn't think much of it. I'd met her a few times at family gatherings, always surrounded by people, always with that calm, together energy that made her seem untouchable. But that night, when she opened the door, something felt different. Maybe it was the silence behind her, the quiet of a house that had spent too many nights without company. Maybe it was the way she smiled, soft and relieved, like she'd been waiting not just for help, but for someone, anyone to share the evening with. She guided me in with a gentle hand on my arm. Her home smelled like fresh laundry and warm tea, simple, comforting scents that made it too easy to relax. She'd already cleared space near the router, apologizing for the chaos even though everything looked spotless to me. She had this effortless grace. Not polished or dramatic, just real. The kind that stays with you longer than it should. When she insisted I sit on the couch while she prepared tea, I hesitated. I wasn't here for long. But she waved off my protests with a playful roll of her eyes. "I won't let you leave on an empty stomach," she said, and there was something in her tone, firm, familiar, that made it impossible to refuse. As I waited, I glanced around. Family photos on the shelf. A wedding picture where she smiled brightly beside her husband. Yet the house felt lonely, like it had been waiting too long for laughter. When she returned with 2 steaming mugs, she settled onto the couch beside me. Not on the other end, but close. Close enough that our knees almost brushed. She removed the throw pillows between us without thinking, or maybe very much thinking. I couldn't tell. The shift brought her closer, close enough that I noticed the faint shimmer of a necklace resting against her collarbone, catching the warm living room light. Close enough that her perfume, sandalwood with a hint of citrus, wrapped around me before I knew what was happening. She asked questions about my work, my hobbies, my plans, but she listened in a way that made every answer feel more important than it was. Her eyes didn't wander. She held my gaze, steady and unguarded, like she was learning me, piece by piece. And every now and then, just for a heartbeat, her eyes lingered. I felt myself falling into those pauses. Tiny stretches of silence that sparked a warmth low in my chest. I swallowed hard and looked away first each time. It was harmless. It had to be harmless. But sitting there beside her, a married woman nearly 20 years older than me, with the room shrinking around us and the air thickening between us, I felt something awaken, something I did not come there looking for. She wasn't doing anything wrong. That was the thought I kept repeating to myself as she leaned in, just a little more, to show me something on her phone. It began innocently. She wanted to prove that the internet had been dropping during her favorite show. But instead of handing me the phone, she angled her body toward mine, drawing closer until the warmth of her arm brushed the outside of mine. A tiny, involuntary breath escaped me. She didn't acknowledge the contact, or maybe she did and pretended not to. Either way, she didn't shift away. Her voice was soft, calm. The kind of softness that invites you to step closer without even realizing you're moving. She pointed at the screen with one well-manicured finger, her skin close enough that I could feel the faintest movement of air with each small gesture. "This is where it freezes," she said, squinting just slightly. The motion tugged a strand of hair loose from behind her ear. Instinctively, I wanted to reach up and place it back, but I held still. Her knee brushed mine, at first by accident, just the natural shifting of 2 people on too small a couch. But then it stayed there, resting confidently, like it belonged in that space. She laughed at something, a light, natural laugh that sent a flutter through me. "I'm terrible with electronics," she joked. "Thank God your husband sent you instead of calling one of those rude customer service people." She didn't realize what that did to me. Being chosen. Being the one she relied on. It shouldn't have meant anything. But in that quiet living room, with the soft lamp light warming the space around us and her presence filling every inch of awareness I had, it meant too much. The conversation drifted into easy territory. Favorite movies, ridiculous family stories, old memories that made her eyes glow with nostalgia. She complimented my sense of humor, my patience, the way I listen without waiting for my turn to talk. It wasn't the words alone. It was the way she said them, like she had noticed something in me that others ignored or simply took for granted. She shifted again, just slightly, and this time her shoulder settled gently against my upper arm. A small touch, a human one, but it sparked wildly through me, grounding me and lifting me at once. I tried to breathe normally, to focus on anything else, but awareness kept circling back to that single point of connection. Skin, warmth, presence, her. She didn't move away. Instead, she let the closeness linger, grow, and settle into something that felt strangely inevitable. Silence fell, not awkward, but full. Full of questions unspoken, full of breaths shared, full of tension that neither of us dared name. My heart beat too loud. I wondered if she could hear it. Her eyes lifted, just briefly searching mine. A fleeting glance that held 1,000 quiet truths. Then she smiled. Soft, almost grateful, like she wasn't alone anymore. And without saying a thing, I smiled back. Neither of us moved for a while. We just let the moment sit between us, warm and quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't push anyone away. It just waits patiently, making room for honesty to surface. She shifted a little, turning toward me, and I could feel the gentle brush of her thigh against mine. She didn't pretend to adjust her distance or correct the closeness now. Instead, she placed her mug down on the coffee table and rested her hands loosely in her lap, fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. Her walls slipped, just a little. You know, she began, voice soft as if she wasn't sure the words were allowed. Marriage isn't always what people think it is, from the outside. I didn't interrupt. Something told me she needed the space to say this, maybe the kind of space she didn't get often. She stared at the steam rising from her tea while she spoke. Sometimes, you can live with someone for years and still feel like a guest in your own home. A small, sad smile tugged at her lips. It's silly, isn't it? Wanting to be seen by the person who's supposed to know you best. She looked up, and in her eyes, I saw a vulnerability I had never expected from her. Kindness, strength, yes, but this loneliness beneath the surface felt far too real. I swallowed, unsure where to place the sudden ache in my chest. I get that, I murmured. More than you'd think. She tilted her head slightly, encouraging me to continue. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be, I said, fingers lightly gripping the cushion beside me. Everyone around me seems so certain, career, relationships, who they are. And I'm just trying not to disappoint anyone. I paused. Especially myself. Her expression softened into something almost tender. She reached out. Not all the way to me, but close, as if she wanted to offer comfort yet feared she might cross a line. You're allowed to take your time, she told me. You don't have to have it all figured out at 24. Her voice lowered, gentle and reassuring. Most of us don't even have it figured out at 43. We both smiled lightly, the kind of smile shared by two people who suddenly feel a little less alone. Our hands, resting so close on the couch, hovered within a breath of touching. The tiniest movement from either of us and our fingers would have intertwined. A risk neither of us took, but neither of us stepped back from. Her gaze lingered, tracing the shape of my uncertainty as if she recognized parts of herself inside it. The moment wrapped around us like a blanket, warm, fragile, and too intimate to name. She inhaled, slow and steady, letting her shoulder brush mine again. This time there was no pretending, no accidental excuse, just closeness. Inside that living room, surrounded by family photos and the quiet hum of a home that had long forgotten laughter, we became each other's safe place, even if only for one stolen evening. We didn't speak for a few long, suspended seconds, but in that silence, everything true was said. For a few precious minutes, the world outside that living room felt like it didn't exist. There was only her shoulder resting lightly against mine, and the soft rhythm of two people breathing in quiet unison. She tucked that loose strand of hair behind her ear, but it slipped free again, almost like it wanted to be noticed. Without fully thinking, she turned toward me and reached out, gently adjusting the collar of my shirt. It was such a simple gesture, a tiny act of care, but it felt far too intimate for the roles we were supposed to play. Her fingertips brushed the side of my neck. The touch was feather-light, but it jolted through me with a heat I wasn't prepared for. My breath caught. I forced myself not to react, not visibly at least, but my heart was a mess of pounding pulses, uneven and loud. She froze for half a second. I saw it. She felt what I felt. Her eyes flicked up to mine, startled, vulnerable, and just a little guilty, as though she had just confessed something without speaking. Then, slowly, almost unwillingly, she withdrew her hand. But instead of moving away, she stayed close enough that the warmth of her skin still lingered against the side of my neck like a memory that refused to fade. "We should probably keep some distance," she said, attempting a light laugh. But her voice cracked on the last word. She was trying to make it sound playful, but it came out like a plea to herself. "You're probably right," I forced out, even though a part of me silently begged her not to go anywhere. She didn't move an inch. Her eyes wandered to the window, to anywhere that wasn't my face. "It's strange," she whispered, "how sometimes someone just understands you in ways you didn't expect." The room felt heavier, not uncomfortable, just charged with all the things we both felt and neither dared name. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," I said softly. She shook her head quickly. "You didn't." She swallowed. That's the problem. Her confession hung there, suspended in the glow of the lamplight, delicate, dangerous. She had said enough to make the truth undeniable, yet not enough to give either of us permission to reach for more. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was terrifying because it told the truth too clearly. She finally turned back to me, and there was defiance in her eyes now. The quiet, brave kind, the kind that risks being seen. "You have this way of looking at people," she murmured, "like you're trying to understand what they're afraid to say." "I just want to understand you," I admitted. Her lips parted, a reaction that spoke louder than any words. She looked down quickly, almost as if she was afraid her thoughts would spill out if she kept looking at me. The air between us felt warm enough to burn. Neither of us leaned in. Neither of us pulled away. It was the kind of almost moment that changes everything, even if nothing actually happens. A moment too honest to forget. She stood abruptly, as if the couch had become too revealing, too honest. Her hands smoothed over her hair, her blouse, anything she could busy herself with while she tried to steady whatever was happening between us. "I'll make more tea," she said, even though both our cups were still nearly full. I let her go. I needed the distance too, if only to catch my breath. But the living room felt immediately colder without her beside me. After a moment, I followed her into the kitchen. I didn't even think about it. My body just moved, drawn by some quiet pull. She was standing at the counter, back to me, shoulders slightly tense as she focused far too intently on rearranging tea bags. "You don't have to keep hosting me," I said gently. "I'm the one who came to help." She didn't turn around right away. When she finally did, her face was composed, but her eyes told a much more complicated story. "Maybe I like the company," she said softly. The room felt smaller than the living room. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint scent of steam and lemon, everything amplified. The world seemed to narrow into just us. I moved to stand beside her, close enough that our arms almost touched. She set down the tea bag, her hand brushing mine by accident. Or maybe not by accident at all. We both froze. This time she didn't pull away. Her fingers rested in my palm, gentle, hesitant, but deliberate. I could feel her heartbeat through her touch. Fast, nervous, alive. For a long breath, we just stared at our hands, entwined only by intention, not yet by a full embrace. Then she looked up, right into my eyes. There was no confusion there, no uncertainty, Just longing restrained only by the thin line of a promise she wasn't sure she could risk breaking. "I don't remember the last time someone made me feel like I mattered," she whispered. "You do," I said immediately, because it was the truest thing I'd said all night. My thumb moved slightly, brushing against her knuckles. A barely there touch, but one that set every nerve inside me on fire. She stepped a fraction closer. Too close. Close enough that I felt the warmth of her breath against my chin. Everything inside me leaned toward her. Not forward, not physically, but emotionally, like some locked door had finally opened. Her lips parted, just enough to steal all the air from the room. "Tell me to stop," she breathed, but I couldn't speak, and she didn't move. That moment, suspended in the space between fear and desire, felt like it might break both of us. Because we weren't just near a line anymore. We were standing right on the edge of it, a single choice away from falling. The kitchen lights felt too bright for a moment like this. Too honest. Too revealing. Her fingers were still resting lightly in my palm. Not holding, not gripping, just staying. It was the staying that said everything. She looked at me like she was searching for permission buried behind my eyes. Permission to choose something reckless, something thrilling, something she had probably been denying herself for years. But then, something shifted. Her expression flickered, hope one second, fear the next. She blinked hard, as if pulling herself back from the edge where we both stood. "I can't," she whispered, breath trembling. She stepped back a single, careful step, but her fingers lingered a moment longer before slipping away from mine. "If I do this, I don't know who I become afterward." The space between us suddenly felt painfully wide. I swallowed, working through the ache in my chest. "I never wanted to make this complicated," I said quietly. "I just didn't expect to feel this." I gestured weakly between us. The air, the tension, the longing neither of us had asked for. She bit her lip. Not a flirtatious bite, a worried one. "I shouldn't want you," she said, voice barely there. "But God, I do. And that scares me." I stepped back too. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to show her she was still safe. That I wasn't here to take advantage of her loneliness or mine. Silence pressed into the room once again. Heavy but honest. "I don't want to be a regret in your life," I told her. "You deserve something real. Something that doesn't hurt afterward." Her eyes glistened with the faintest shine. Not quite tears, but close enough to warn me that this was no simple crush. She cared. She cared enough to walk away from what she wanted. She drew a slow breath, grounding herself. "You make me remember what it's like to feel seen," she said. "To feel alive." She shook her head gently. "But I can't lose myself in a moment. Not when there's a whole life I already built." She moved back to the couch, deliberately putting space and walls and choices between us. She sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, like she needed to hold on to herself. I joined her, not too close, not too far. A respectful distance. A necessary distance. We both watched the shadows the lamp cast on the wall. Two silhouettes side by side. So close, yet so impossibly apart. "Thank you," she finally said. "For what?" "For stopping," she replied with a sad smile. "Even though I didn't want you to." Her honesty hurt more than any distance could. But it was also the most beautiful thing she could have given me. The truth of her heart, unmasked and trembling. We didn't reach for each other again. But we didn't regret what almost happened either. Because some connections are real even if they never cross the line. The clock on her wall ticked a little louder than before, or maybe we were just more aware of the passing time now. Whatever had sparked between us, whatever had pulled our hearts so dangerously near each other, it was settling into something quieter, something that would last longer than a touch or a kiss. She stood slowly. Her movements were graceful again, composed, as if she were carefully rebuilding all the boundaries she had let slip tonight. "I should let you go," she murmured. "It's getting late." I nodded, even though part of me wished she'd ask me to stay just a moment longer. As I stepped toward the door, she followed, stopping close enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence again. just not quite close enough to feel her touch. I slipped on my shoes, giving my hands something to do, something that grounded me. When I straightened, she was already watching me, her arms loosely crossed, her expression impossible to read. We stood there a moment, suspended in the strange silence of goodbye, a silence full of everything we almost became. Her eyes softened, filled with gratitude and wistfulness all at once. "Tonight was unexpected," she said. Her voice wavered slightly. "But I needed it more than you know." I swallowed, feeling the truth of her words settle deep. "I'm glad I came," I said, "even if I have no idea what I'm taking with me." She breathed a quiet laugh, the kind that holds a tear hostage in the corner of an eye. Then, gently, she reached for my arm. Her fingers rested against my sleeve first, then slid just slightly until her hand found the inside of my forearm, anchored there, firm, warm, sincere. It wasn't a flirtation. It was a thank you, promise, a goodbye. "I hope," she whispered, searching my face like she needed me to understand something without saying it aloud. "You never let anyone make you feel small. You have a kind heart. Don't hide it." I wanted to respond, but the words caught on the emotion rising in my chest. Instead, I turned my hand over, letting my fingers brush her wrist. A subtle gesture, one that asked for nothing but acknowledged everything. For a lingering breath, we stayed like that, holding on to the only moment we were allowed to share fully, without consequences. Then she released me, slowly, respectfully, as if letting go was the most difficult thing she had done in a long time. I stepped outside, the cool night air rushing around me, grounding me in reality again. She remained in the doorway, arms now gently hugging her own shoulders. The porch light framed her in soft gold, making her look both strong and heartbreakingly human. "Take care," she said softly. "You too," I replied, and I meant it more than she knew. As the door closed, I stood there for a long moment, just breathing, just feeling. Some goodbyes are loud and messy, but ours was quiet and unforgettable, because nothing happened, yet everything did. And as I walked away into the night, one truth echoed in my mind. Sometimes the closest you ever get to love is the love you're brave enough to walk away from. If this story touched you, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more slow burn romances that feel real and unforgettable.